So good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. It's a rainy day here in Fresno. I hope that you're getting the rain if you need it wherever you are. On behalf of the CSU Student Success Network, I'd like to welcome you to our Spring 2026 convening, which is supporting students together, strengthening student advising in the CSU. Please know that we have not enabled AI, but this meeting is being transcribed using Zoom transcription for internal network purposes. And we are recording this session for posting on our website, but we won't be posting the Q&A. So it might look like we are still recording during the Q&A because we are, but we will be sure to edit that out. Slide. My name is Dr. Larissa Mercado Lopez. My pronouns are she, her. I'm interim convenings director for the network, and I'm also professor and department chair of women's gender and sexuality studies at Fresno State. And today I am joined by my network collaborator, Melinda Karp, network fellow with Ed Insights and the Student Success Network, and founder of Phase 2 Advisory. Slide. First, to ground ourselves in a recognition of where we are situated, we'll get started with our land acknowledgement. Please use the link provided in the chat box to identify and learn about the Native people of the location where you sit. And while I read our acknowledgement statement, I invite you to honor and acknowledge them in the chat box. Sacramento State, which facilitates the network, acknowledges with respect the land our campus is on today was and continues to be the homelands of the indigenous people of this area, the Nisenan, specifically the Nisempawanan and Miwok. The larger Sacramento area and its rivers serve as a gathering place for many local tribes from the surrounding valley and foothills, including the Southern Maidu, Patwin, and Winton. Sacramento State recognizes these lands and riverways as unceded traditional territories of these Native peoples. We further recognize these California Native nations and respect their sovereignty. By offering this land acknowledgement, we affirm the university's commitment to build relationships and foster a university environment of success to better serve Native nations and communities. Slide. So to support inclusivity, we invite you to partake in our inclusive meeting practices. This includes keeping your video off in the main session areas when you're not asking a question or commenting. Mute your video or your audio when you're not asking a question or commenting. Type in the chat or Q&A for questions and comments. Use your full name and or pronouns. If you need help or experiencing challenges, click on reactions, then click the raise hand icon. And you can also send a message directly to Shannon, who might appear as Shannon or CCE producer in the chat. Slide, please. So to ensure that our conversations are grounded in respect for one another, we encourage you to follow our conversation values that ask each one of us to do the following. Acknowledge one another as equals. Stay curious about each other and the individual paths that brought us together. Slow down so we have time to think and reflect. Practice self-awareness. Be generous with each other and mindful of your impact on others. Expect it to be messy at times. Respect the confidentiality of what is shared in this space. And recognize that no one knows everything, but together we know a lot. Slide. So for those of you who might be joining us for the first time, the CSU Student Success Network, which we might refer to as a network, is an independent network developed by CSU staff, faculty, and administrators. Its vision is to transform the lives of Californians by unleashing the full potential of the CSU as a broad access public university whose faculty, staff, and administrators work together to provide students with outstanding and equitable opportunities and outcomes for post-secondary learning and success. And to learn more about how we work, you can visit the link that's been placed in the chat, and then you can learn more about our ongoing activities, which is this convening is one of them. Slide. And we also invite you to stay connected with us by engaging with us on Blue Sky and on LinkedIn. Slide. So now we're sharing our agenda for the day. So it begins with our welcome and introduction to the network and the session. And then we transition to a presentation by Dr. Sarah Ellison and Alvin Nguyen from Sonoma State. Then we transition to a presentation by San Francisco State University by Dr. Lori Bethway and Kimberly Altura. And then we will give you an opportunity to engage in Q&A and discussion with our presenters. And then we'll end with some reflection questions that we'd like for you to kind of take back to your home campuses for further conversation. Slide. So our convening objectives today include learning about campus's efforts to advance holistic advising practices, and learning how campuses have communicated change to advising to campus constituents in ways that build understanding and openness to a new approach. Slide. Let me see. I think, can you go over a couple more slides? One more slide. There it is. Sorry, that's coming before the next slide. So now we're moving on to why we are here. And today, we're so excited to bring to you two campuses that are doing
That's fine.
exemplary
Yep.
work to to reimagine advising in ways that meet the complex and diverse needs of our students. We know that during times of financial constraint, that holistic advising is especially critical for improving retention and completion. And across our campuses, we are continuing to strengthen our commitments to equitable, student-centered support. And we're also committed to continuing to find better ways to make that commitment or to put that commitment into action, which is why we're all here today. As most of you here know, NACADA, the National Academic Advising Association, conducted site visits at 22 of our 23 campuses and developed reports with recommendations to strengthen and advance advising practices on those campuses. And at some point in this coming year, we hope to create some opportunities for engaging with one another on where we are with those recommendations. But what has remained constant both before and after the report is the importance of working toward an advising system that's connected, that's student-centered, and that really retains the human relationships that we know are so important to the student experience. So holistic advising, it integrates all areas of student support into a seamless, continuous experience. And many of us here are implementing change towards that goal. And we know that it requires real intentionality about how we collect and use that data, use data to inform the coordination of that support. And it means being intentional about how we manage change, right? Especially in ways that create more clarity for folks on our campuses about the changes that we're making and that encourage alignment and shared ownership across the institution. So both presentations today will demonstrate what this can look like and will plant seeds for how we might begin to articulate a shared vision for advising in the CSU. So having said that, today's presentations will be of strong interest to those whose professional responsibilities involve direct advising and retention efforts. Yet, as with all of our activities in the network, we hope that all of you will find relevant insights to apply within your own roles and contexts. So today we want you to listen out for what resonates, what might be transferable, what might need to be reimagined to fit your campus culture and your student population. And we also encourage you to think about how these ideas can help you to further your alignment with the CSU Student Success Framework and the work that you continue to do towards your campus's equity goals. So to support you in listening out for and thinking about those next steps, we want to share with you an evidence-based framework, a set of guiding principles for redesigning academic advising. So presenting her framework and research is Melinda Karp. And Shannon, can you go back 3 slides? please. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And we just wanted to ground the work of the institutions you're about to hear from, as well as the work that's probably happening on your own campuses, in the evidence, in part just to make sure that you know that where we're headed, as difficult as change management can be, is grounded in what we know works for the students we care most about. This framework, we call it SIP, comes from 3 comprehensive literature reviews that were conducted at Teachers College, Columbia University over the span of about a decade. It was then actually reaffirmed by the Department of Education's What Works Clearinghouse. Larissa, you can go ahead and put that link in the chat whenever you're ready, as the best practices in academic advising. Essentially, what it argues is that if we become more holistic, and we will improve student success. And holistic advising sort of enacts these 5 principles or these design ideas. And it essentially says that if you are strategic in how you use your resources, and I think that's important, it's not saying get new resources, it's thinking about how to use your existing resources strategically, you can support students in ways that are sustained, meaning throughout their educational life course, integrated, meaning connecting all of the pieces of who they are as learners, career, academic, basic needs, um, doing that over time in ways that are sort of inescapable for students. If you are proactive, getting ahead of things, and if you are personalized, and to me, this is always the most important principle, right? Making sure that students receive what they need when they need it from someone who knows them well. If you can build advising systems that do these things, you are likely to improve student retention and completion. If you go to the next slide, one of the things that's important to note is that you'll see that this is not a recipe. This is not saying thou shalt do blah, blah, blah. It is a set of principles that you can then enact in ways that make sense for your own institution. And we're going to hear about that today, how this might show up differently in different campuses. So being strategic could mean lots of things. It could be analytics, it could be group advising, it could be rethinking how people do their jobs. Similarly, that sustained support can come from long-term faculty advisors or coaches. The question isn't like, do a certain thing. The question becomes, how do we do these principles on our campuses? I will say that this evidence-based, these literature reviews pull from a large number of studies that looked at interventions, approaches, programs, lots of ways of like doing SIP. And these were the cross-cutting factors. So it didn't matter what you called the approach. What matters is that these things were in it. And if you go to the next slide, what's really exciting is that this framework has been around long enough that we can test it. So these are a large number of randomized control trial studies. That's that gold standard causal way of evaluating impact. All of these interventions and programs were SIPI, but they did it in lots of different ways. The nuances for our short time are less important, but I'm happy to unpack them another time. Some of them use social workers embedded on college campuses. Some of them use virtual coaching. Some of them use really intensive mandatory advising. But all of them provide that strategic, sustained, personalized support the literature tells us matters. All of them were large enough to be subject to a randomized control trial, and all of them were long-standing enough that we could track students, or the researchers could track students to graduation. The bright blue bars are the students who got that SIPI approach. The teal bars on the right are the students who were in the business as usual advising model. And you can see that in every instance, there was a statistically significant positive impact on student completion. So in other words, when institutions provide SIPI support, students complete at much higher rates, sometimes doubling completion rates. So we wanted to name this and let you know that this work is grounded in what we know works for students, so that as you hear how this shows up in the 2 institutions we're about to hear from, you can start to make connections, and then also start to make connections to the work that's happening on your own campuses. Always happy to answer questions about this in the chat or offline. This was a really short primer, and I will turn it back over to Larissa to introduce our colleagues who will share about their work.
Thank you. Slide, please. Yes. So now let's hear from our campuses and learn about how some of these principles show up. So our first presenters are Dr. Sarah Ellison and Alvin Nguyen from Sonoma State. Dr. Ellison is Associate Vice President for Student Affairs at Sonoma State, and Alvin serves as the Director of Student Success and University Advising. And you can read more about them in their bios if you click the link in the chat. So at this point, we will invite Dr. Ellison and Alvin to come off mute and share their presentation.
Thank you all so much. Appreciate that assist there. So myself and Alvin, we're here to chat with you all today about how we are re-envisioning holistic advising here at Sonoma State. And again, very honored to be here with you all to do so. And we can go ahead and go to the next slide. And so before we can really talk about some of the changes and shifts and things that we've done here at Sonoma State, I wanted to make sure I could set the stage for everyone for the discussion and kind of talk about more about our foundation and the reality of where Sonoma State has been, where we're at, and where we're shifting to. So for context and for folks here, as the AVP for Student Affairs, I have been with Sonoma State for 2.5 years now. Coming into my role, my background has been deeply rooted in academic advising and student success. I had the opportunity to work at Cal State San Bernardino, which was an amazing campus, and some opportunity to work at some other universities on the East Coast as well. But when I arrived to Sonoma State, it was very clear that the campus was navigating many different challenges, over a decade of challenges, most notably in the areas of enrollment and declining retention. And so we have some things that we'll talk about related to that. Some other effects the campus was experiencing, of course, like many of us, that pandemic ripple effect. And then also some things that are not listed there is the campus was also experiencing a lot of change and challenges with leadership turnover, both at the presidential level, provost and VP of Student Affairs area. And then there were also regional and local issues that were happening as well in terms of devastating fires in the area. So just as you can imagine, just the campus has been through a lot, as I'm sure many campuses have been as well. But I think that's important to kind of help with how we kind of shaped the opportunity and conversation around change as well. So, of course, naturally in my role, I took the opportunity when I first joined the campus to kind of sit back, get to know my area and departments, as well as get to know the campus. And there were some immediate things I think that came up that I recognized in terms of patterns associated more with universities and structures that operate more from a siloed department structure, much more of a little bit of a transactional focus of advising in terms of getting students appointments and getting them registered, and having the opportunity to really think about how we could shape some of these experiences for students at Sonoma State. And so part of that became thinking about how do we break down these silos, how do we think about proactive outreach, and then how do we incorporate data into that as well. And so within just my first couple of weeks and months on the job, I think the first week we had our NACADA review happening, so I got to jump right into that, and that was really great. So it gave a lot of opportunity. So for many of the challenges the campus is experiencing and had experienced, also gave us a lot of opportunity. And one of the things I want to do as we move into our next slides and things is one of the things I like to do, especially because we're going to incorporate some data into our presentation, is I like to just ground everybody that as we're showing data represented in numbers and percentages, I like to just remind folks that our data also reflects the real experiences of our students, of our campus, and then also for the staff and professionals that serve them. So data is one part of the story. It is one that we lean into to help. We coin it here, data for thought, but I like to just set that stage for everybody just as we go to look at the data. That's just one part of the story of our campus and our student experience. And so we can transition to the next slide.
All right, good morning, everybody. My name is Alvin Nguyen. I'm the Director of Student Success and University Advising. Just a little bit of history. I had the opportunity to create our Office of Student Success and Retention. And some of the changes that Dr. Ellison mentioned was to move University Advising under Student Success and Retention to align some of the data work that we're doing in the effort to build out more holistic advising and proactive advising as well. So immediately, as we made some of those alignments, we saw some impact. So in our first year of making these changes, we saw our first year retention for that fall 23 cohort As you can see here, the second column to the third column moved from 75.2% up to 79.3%. And that started off with having a more campus-wide effort in increasing our fall to spring retention rate. And so we had a really big re-enrollment campaign that rolled out under the Student Success and Retention and University Advising model, where we've always had a 95% goal. And we were actually able to accomplish that with the entire continuing student population. And with that effort, it trickled down to our first year students. So that fall 23 FTFY cohort saw our best retention rate of coming in at 79.3%. So I think this is a really good example of when you have a coordinated effort across campus, that some of that also trickles down to our first year cohort as well. Another thing that we did was we established retention goals, not only for all of our students, but with each of our FTFY and FTT cohorts. So we're going to be talking a little bit more about our FTFY, but the point here is being that we saw some immediate impact, and that's what really led some of that drove us to some of the work that we'd be doing. So the next slide, please. So some of the things that we did in those first 2 years of our transformation, as Dr. Ellison mentioned, the NACADA review drove a lot of our decision making, but obviously there were some budget restrictions and other alignments that needed to take place as well. So there are some low-hanging fruit that we really focused on, one of which was aligning these college success teams. So we did not have a caseload model before, or if we did, it was not as streamlined and clear for our students, our advisors, and our faculty. So step one was to rebalance all of our caseloads and establish what we call college success teams. And what that means is that all of our outward-facing materials, our success teams on our EAB Navigate platform, our web pages, PeopleSoft, all of our hard paper materials, we wanted to make it very clear who the students' primary advisors are. And in often cases, there are special populations as well. So in the event of EOP advisors or TRIO advisors, making it very clear for our students who their primary advisor would be and what instances in which they would be seeking out a specialized population advisor. On top of that, making sure that our faculty, departments, associate deans, so on and so forth, are aware of these changes so that they are able to better refer students to the services that they need. We also made sure to include our career advisors in these college success teams as well. So when a student pulls up their college success team, they're able to see that advising happens across multiple areas, not just with academic advising. And with that, we also made sure that we did cross-training of our professional academic advisors with our career services. We offered NACE training as well for our career advisors. So like I said, that was low-hanging fruit in terms of getting students very clear information as to where they should be going for what purposes. Then when we started introducing data, the first thing we did was we made sure that our re-enrollment efforts were clear across campus. So the Office of Student Success and Retention would run re-enrollment reports and make sure that that was available across campus to our advisors, to our associate deans, cabinet, campus leadership as well. And from that, we established what we call our Data to Doing Retention Collaborative, which is a bi-weekly meeting that is open to the entire campus for folks to come in and learn more about what our re-enrollment efforts entail, what our current retention numbers are. Really is just making data as accessible and available to people as much as possible for them to be able to make meaning of the work that they're doing and to see how that data can be utilized in their respective areas. Earlier, you heard me mention there's that coordinated communication to all of the areas across campus. The way we were able to do that was actually to establish a partnership with institutional effectiveness. And I know that can be a tough nut to crack sometimes. But in our situation, the fact that we were offering re-enrollment reports for the last couple of years, our institutional effectiveness department felt confident that we were able to use and have access to certain data that we would be able to make meaning of and provide offices with on-the-spot data. So we're not talking about offering data for the purposes of grants or official reporting, but really allow departments and those on the ground to be able to have access to data to get health checks of their students so that they can make some more informed decision making. And now Dr. Ellison is going to talk a little bit more about how we expanded some of this communication with campus leadership.
Thanks, Alvin, so much. And so we can go to the next slide. So as we mentioned, we're continuing to build. This took us, like I said, about 2 years to kind of get off the ground. And what it really started with was examining the information we got back from the NACADA report, as well as examining the reality of the experiences our students were having, staff were having, faculty were having. And a lot of that was just not knowing who the partners were, not knowing who we would go to, not knowing how to align expertise between the faculty advisors, the professional advisors, the career office, and really starting to think about our models and breaking down the silos so we can move away from more of a deficit approach in terms of everything an office can't do to everything offices could do and partner and lead along the way. So one of the things as we acknowledge many of the challenges, again, we were primed for opportunities and ways to explore different ways of doing things given our situation. And so part of that, as I'd mentioned, was really committing to breaking down the silos, moving away from a single unified support and how we started to integrate faculty support, career services, advising together, and then student success and retention. So it wasn't just one thing related to administrative alignment as much as it was helping to create a seamless experience for our students as well as for our staff and faculty to navigate the different offices and who was available and who was there to partner with them and help them navigate their campus experience. Then we really moved because we went back to or went to that caseload model and college success team approach. We got to be a lot more proactive in our outreach, and the data was a big piece of that as well too. So as Alvin had mentioned, that on the spot data allowed our advising teams, the experts, the folks on the ground to really think about how they could be more proactive with their students instead of waiting for things that they could think about getting a report after retention. They were able to in real time think about where are my students at, what do they need, and how could we build in more proactive outreach. Our departments and faculty were able to use those reports as well. So we partnered with our associate deans and deans and did meetings with chairs as well too to show them where their students were at. And so we really wanted to think about how we could flip that script to a model of a high-touch relational intervention. And then we had to hardwire that data to doing framework into that. As Alvin had mentioned, that on-the-spot data, that really was a huge part for us in terms of allowing the data to serve as a little bit of a neutral area and help us build reliable partnership with our offices, from institutional effectiveness to our deans and associate deans to the departments across the Division of Student Affairs and within our own areas. We really wanted to show that the data we could provide, that we did provide, that folks could do something with that, take action, make meaning, and really think about their programs and services and support. So by embedding that data supported intervention into our workflows, we're able to ensure that the interactions we have with our students are informed and intentional and designed for their success, and allowing that voice for the professionals who are serving those students to also think about the data and what they're seeing and what they're gleaning from it as well. And then I'm going to hand it back over to Alvin because he'll do a little bit deeper for us on the next slide as well too.
Great, thank you. So our analyst over in Student Success and Retention has access to our EAB Navigate platform. We also have access to Tableau, our data management system, and then we also heavily rely on Grad 365. And this slide here is talking about reframing the data. So oftentimes when you just have one data management system or looking at through one platform, it's hard to see the entire picture, or there's maybe different definitions of student population. So in the case of our budget cuts, where we did have majors that were slated for discontinuation, we also discontinued our athletics program. We knew that folks were getting information from disparate places, and the story wasn't being necessarily told in a meaningful way. The challenge here, as you can see, was that there was an understanding that all of our students were going to be affected by these budget reductions, and that there was going to be a mass exodus of our students. And yes, that was the case. As you can see with the athlete column there, our athletes attributed to 6% of our overall drop for our fall 24 first year cohort. However, in using these 3 different data platforms and looking across the board, we disaggregated the data because there really wasn't anywhere on campus that was tracking specifically our athlete population or students who are in the majors that were planned for discontinuation. Our office was able to track them. So when we disaggregated it and looked at our affected major students, our athletes, and then students that are not affected by any of these budget reductions, we actually saw that we retained that third column there, 80% of our first-time first years who are not an athlete or in an affected major. And that 80% matches that fall 24 or fall 23 cohort number that I mentioned last time, right, which was 79.2. So in other words, despite all these big changes on campus, for those students who are not affected by these challenges, we were able to retain them at the same rate as we did the previous year. And then looking at all of our students, for all of our continuing students, that retention gap was even less. So there is only about an 8% retention gap between all of our continuing students who are non-affected by these budget reductions versus those who were. And so this is a prime example of using the different data sources, calling them together, and being able to do some storytelling to reframe some of the narratives that are happening on campus and to really prioritize which areas will require more effort. So in the case of this situation, we do have a coordinated advisor outreach and campaign calendar that we use for all of our professional advisors. And so, yes, we did acknowledge some of the challenges of the budget reductions, but we were able to use this data to cull together some outreach campaigns that specifically focused on our students who were not affected, right? Because our advisors were very heavily focused on thinking about retaining our students who are affected, and we wanted to make sure that there wasn't a secondary impact whereby our non-affected students were forgotten about and fall on the wayside. So an example of disaggregating the data and using that data to prioritize the coordinated outreach and efforts that our professional advisors are doing.
Thank you, Alvin. And then I'll close this out with the final slide and make sure we give time for our other presenters as well. But I think one of the biggest things, I would like to wrap up in this for everyone is that, it is definitely possible to make changes across campus. For us, we were somewhat forced into some of the changes given our situation in terms of around budget and all of those things. But it also, again, primed us for some amazing opportunities. As Alvin was mentioning, a lot of that data and the impact that we saw from making those changes to college success teams to being more integrated and coordinated with our departments and with our leadership, the campus was starting to speak the same language in terms of student support and what we were attacking in terms of as a problem. So that coordinated effort, we weren't all trying to tackle different pieces of retention, different pieces of one issue. We really got the opportunity to come together through that data. And so, all the strategy in the world really doesn't mean anything if we don't move that needle for our students. And so we've been able to really do that and have some really strong results, which has been very positive for our campus, given all that we have gone through. But the feedback report from our students, the interactions with our faculty and departments, with the Career Center, taking all of those voices into consideration really allowed us the opportunity to, again, focus on how we break down those silos so we can build a much more seamless experience for our students. And so we've been able to highlight a lot of that success, but always happy to chat with campuses about, I always talk about the theory and in practice. So in theory, everything sounds really great, but in practice, it does take a lot of work. It does take a lot of intentional time, a lot of listening as well too, but it's definitely possible, definitely possible. And so we're really thankful to you all for allowing us to share a little bit about our story. And we're looking forward to hear about all the amazing things happening at San Francisco State next.